silky ocean. Won't you come with me? Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline.
Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden Podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the Weekending Show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and an opportunity to hear stories from the past and present. In this episode, it's the height of summer for some crops in the garden, and Tom Pattinson is as busy as a bee. Steve Lowe is out and about looking for aliens as he goes in search of close encounters of the vegetative kind. We're out and about with Tom Cadwallender, who has another episode in his Great Places to See Birds series. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P, all coming up on the Nature Garden Podcast.
Come with me, darling, down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline. Take my hand and come with me, darling, down to the shoreline.
The sun's been shining here on Holy Island and the flowers and fruit and veg are looking fab. Well, with a bit of help from the watering can. And Tom Pattinson is here to delight us this week with all the warmth and beauty of the August garden.
Well, hello. It's summer, high summer. The sun is beating down on my body and it feels good to be here. I'm standing in the garden at home. Let me explain the setup. We have a 1/4 acre site. We're surrounded by hedges and the garden wraps around the house. At the front end of the house, the garden, we have an east-facing aspect, and there are quite a lot of ornamental plants and shrubs and dwarf trees in there. At the western side, it's where it's all happening at the moment. We have soft fruits and we have the vegetable plot, asparagus bed, strawberry bed, all of that. I've just been picking recently the red currants and the black currants. They were ripe. The gooseberries aren't quite ripe. They're just like to soften a wee bit more. But the raspberries, my goodness, it's as if they're fighting for their lives. They're giving me so much fruit at the moment. Most of it is going into the freezer. We've been making jams. Judy and my wife and I have been sorting jam out for the winter period. But at the moment, I'm standing in, it's quite a breeze today actually, but I'm standing in the beautiful surrounding of the vegetable plot, or plots I should say. Now this is 10 yards by 8 yards, so about 80 square yards. But rather than have just a broad swathe of soil-based land with paths, just ordinary paths trodden by our feet, we have sort of a parterre set up here. There are flagged pathways in between. I have 6 main raised island beds. Each of those is about 4 to 5 square meters of growing space, and each of those is full at the moment. The idea being, in winter, when it's so wet, we come out to pick some leeks or some Brussels sprouts or some winter greens, and if it were just ordinary soil, we'd have to walk over the soil, get our feet in a bit of a state. Now, this is any time of year, fantastic pathway, walk around, and you can almost reach to the centre of each bed from a path, either of the paths. It's symmetrical to look at, and I'm looking down the central pathway, which has 2 passing places. There are 2 large containers. They have lavender in flower, which the bees are on at the moment, around about the base, and bay trees, standard bay trees, coming up through the centre. It looked quite attractive to me anyway. But down to the crops. These are, I'm standing over the radishes, the salad bed, radishes, different leaf lettuce. Don't buy the heart-in lettuce, I grow the leaf lettuce because it's cut and come again. It'll last almost forever. But having said that, I've got some from about 2 months ago. It's going over a little bit. We've been watering as much as possible. It's salad bowl lettuce. I've got some we planted about 6 weeks ago, and they're standing about 6-8 centimetres tall, ready to take over. And there were some that were planted just less than 10 days ago, and they're just germinating. So there's continuity in the salad crops we have. On the same bed, we have corn on the cob, and it's a square block planting, which is 5 plants by 5 plants, 25 plants. Each plant bears 2 cobs. That's all I allow, 2 cobs of corn on each plant. And I'm rustling down amongst it at the moment. I'm feeling one of the cobs, and oh my goodness, that is ready. Then beautiful, swelling up. It's just about on turn. We start harvesting about the middle of August. The brown tuft of flower on the top has faded, and these are just ready for action. And they will last for quite a while. But we're going to start harvesting them probably next week. Over to my right, I've got the leeks for winter, a block of leeks, and I have the onions, which will go into storage, and they fill one of the other beds. Moving down, I have some more salad crops, the leaf lettuce, and that is radish French breakfast, 2 rows of that, and 2 more rows of that perpetual spinach, which will go well. I like a few flowers as well. We've got chives, and I don't know if you can hear the bees on them, but they're covered in bees at the moment. They flowered earlier, probably about a month ago, and then the flowers faded, these chives, and we chopped them down, right down at the base, and we've got a second lot of growth, lots of lovely chives, leaves for salad, and also those beautiful flowers again for the bees. This next bed, we've got the courgettes, and this is the green one, Defender. Oops, that's growing into a marrow. If you don't keep cutting and using the courgettes, we've got about 6 plants here that turn into marrows. And on the same bed, we've got the runner beans. These are beautiful, upper wigwam. And they have one of them, this is St. George. It has white and red flowers on it, quite attractive. Gosh, the beans are attractive as well. They're great, long, beautiful beans, and they're just, we've been using them for about 2 or 3 weeks, and they're still fresh, keep coming. Brilliant. Over here, we've got the broad beans, and this is the Brussels sprout bed for winter. That's Winston, which is a tall growing sprout, and of course the potatoes. This is Charlotte, a bed of Charlotte, and it is digging beautifully at the moment. As soon as that's finished, we'll crop that land, we'll put another crop in for winter. We use every piece of land we can, and my golly, this vegetable beds, they're buzzing at the moment.
Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust is out and about along the waterways this week in search of troublesome invaders, and he has a note of caution. Take heed, folks.
Well, luckily it's not quite as warm as it has been today. A little bit breezy actually, but it's very, very nice, I have to say. And I'm out in North Northumberland near the coast today on the lookout for aliens. Now, don't panic. These aren't Martians. They're not arrived here by UFOs. But these are actually invasive plants that have been introduced to the UK, and some of which are actually causing some fairly major problems. Now, I've just come across one which is fairly common, and it's a difficult one to describe, other than the fact that it has quite a deep pink, trumpet-like flower at the top of a red stem. Now the stem's actually quite soft, to touch it crushes, and the leaves are elongated and quite spiky. Now this is the Himalayan balsam, which is actually quite, as I say, it's quite common in Northumberland now, unfortunately, and it spreads like mad because the seed head on it actually explodes when you touch it, when it's got seed, so the seeds can be projected quite a long way. And this is one that we are starting to have problems with on watercourses, so it's definitely one that's worth looking out for and one that's worth reporting. Now, in this particular case, I can get hold of it and just pull it up by the roots. Did you hear it pop? It actually comes out quite easily, so it's really shallow rooted. But obviously it's a bit of a problem for us. So I'm going off now in search of other things. I'm actually on the Long Nanny Burn in Northumberland, and I know there's something else that I'm looking for here. So I'll set off and see what we can find. Oop, didn't see that fence there. Anyway, I found the second species that I thought was here. Wasn't entirely sure, but I've arrived at it. And I'm about 5'11", and this plant is actually towering above me. In fact, it's actually towering below me because it starts on the bank as well. And this is the giant hogweed, which is, I'm afraid, becoming more of a pest. And this plant, how do I describe it? This one, well, it's huge for starters. It has a massive flower head, and the flower head is about, let's say, 14 inches across. The flowers are white. They're on an umbrella, like it's an umbellifer, so it has like an umbrella-like form. And each of the flowers on this, individual flowers produce seed, and each plant will have up to 60,000 seeds on it. So you can imagine if you've got one of these, it can actually become a problem fairly quickly. Now, back to the description, the stem of it is, I can't get my hand around it, let's put it that way, and it's spiky, so I wouldn't want to put my hand around it. And it has a red colour to it, also very yellow. The leaves are very big, and again, they're like a little sort of miniature Christmas tree, if you can imagine that. Not miniature really at all, because they're really big, but they've got very serrated leaves. You wouldn't want to touch this plant though, because it's what's called it gives you a photosensitive reaction. The sap that comes off it, if it gets on your skin and then reacts with sunlight, it'll actually burn you, and those burns can last for years and years and years. And I do remember when I was a child actually finding this on a river, and one of my mates actually had cut a bit off to make a pea shooter out of it, because it is hollow. And he got the sap on his lips, and they burnt his lips. So it's one to keep away from. The reason why I'm mentioning it though is because we are in the process of trying to record where these invasive species actually are, so that we can deal with them. And this one is actually on the list of plants that can't be introduced into the wild. It is actually a native, this one. So although we call it an invasive species, it's not a non-native, but it's a real problem. And once you get that many seeds, it'll spread downstream. So the only way you can really tackle it is to get upstream and deal with it. It needs spraying professionally, or alternatively in the spring we could probably put a spade through its roots as it starts to emerge. But once it dies back, apart from the stem being left, you don't know this is there because it disappears underground. So it's a massive problem, this one. And actually, there's quite a lot of it here, unfortunately. Just the one within a couple of metres of me, I can see about 9 plants. And they're all like giant triffids, really. It's the only way I can describe it. Certainly want to keep your eye open for, but keep your hands away from it if you possibly can. I'm just crossing the stream now, and here is the third species. Now, I didn't actually know this was here, so I'm surprised to find it. It's a very small stand of Japanese knotweed. I'm sure many people will have heard of Japanese knotweed. It's a really pernicious plant. There's a very tiny stand here, only about 3 stems, but again, this is another one that we want to know about. And Japanese knotweed was introduced to the UK, not because it has pretty flowers or anything like that, but because of its structural form. It does grow quite tall. Again, looking at it, it's got a hollow red stem, so hollow red stems seem to be a bit of a giveaway, don't they? But this one, it is capable of growing through concrete. So it's also, if you've got it on your land, it's classed as a toxic plant rather than just as a weed. So it has to go to a proper waste management site to get rid of it. But digging it up is no solution, to be perfectly honest with you, because you often leave a little bit of rhizome behind, and it becomes a problem. It's quite often found on derelict land where soil has been moved from A to B and this plant has been in it. So again, if you've got if you come across any land like this, we do need to know where it is so we can map it and hopefully can deal with it. In this case, the main way of dealing with it is going to be through pesticides again, although we are trying to look at other methods for dealing with any of these invasive non-native species, including things like introducing moulds or fungi or rusts, as they're called, into them. But there's nothing that you can do at this major stage to actually deal with some of them in the amount that we need to do. But so it is something that the Rivers Trust, Northumberland Rivers Trust, are actually pulling together proposals for. And if we possibly can, then what we'd like to be able to do would be to get out a team of people going dealing with these from source to sea, as it were. And unfortunately, that is going to mean a lot of manpower, to be honest. But the main thing at the minute is, if anyone does come across any of these, and you can find lots of information about them online, then I think the main thing we would like people to do is to report them, please. You can send that information to us at the Rivers Trust, and I would suggest that the best way to do that is either via the website or possibly via our Facebook page. But also, I refer people to Eric Northeast, which is the Environmental Records Information Northeast, and Eric actually has a repository for information on location and density of shrubs, and we also now have worked up a system whereby any records that come in get sent out wherever possible to the landowner, but certainly to people who have some kind of involvement with it. Hopefully that means that it gets dealt with a little bit more quickly. Now I'm just going to pause for a second because I've got a lovely brown hare just floating around in the grass next to us. He's just gone behind a little bit of rush. I can still see his ears popping up. That's a wonderful sight, isn't it? Of course, they were introduced by the Romans, so we count them as native now, don't we? So that's an interesting position to be in. Anyway, those are the plants that we're particularly keen on. The other thing I'll mention is signal crayfish. Signal crayfish are becoming a mainstay of some of our watercourses, and unfortunately they do carry a plague with them, which our local native crayfish are sadly very susceptible to, and it will wipe them out. And we are doing some work with the Rivers Trust this year looking at their location for those. But because they're actually in the water, I'm not going to suggest that anyone goes looking for them. But I hope that information has been of interest to people. And, by all means, if you want any more, contact us at the Wildlife Trust, at the Rivers Trusts, at the Environment Agency, or via the ERIC project, and I'm sure we can get something back to you.
Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology has been sending us reports on great places to see birds, and here he is with some more inspiration.
I've been chatting recently about some of my favourite birdwatching locations in the county, the wonderful, the majestic, the magnificent county of Northumberland. And you may sense I'm a little bit biased here, but that's fair enough. I am. But anyway, yes, to continue that series of where I enjoy watching birds, and perhaps you would too, I want to talk about seeing wading birds. And I've just recently talked about some of the wading birds that are coming down to the Northumberland coast as either a service station or to winter here. But just to give you an insight to possibly where the best places or an interesting place, the easiest place to go and have a look at them. So what I would do, what I do actually, if I'm out and about for the day, I'll start at home, but I'll go down on the Aln estuary. But as I've mentioned previously, I will pick a rising tide, and I think that's the crucial thing. You don't go on a falling tide if you can avoid it, but go on a rising tide and get sort of half tide, start at half tide. And I would go down on the Aln estuary. You'll see the wading birds starting to congregate. And one of the best vantage points, there's two really good vantage points of the Aln estuary. One is from the west side, and you can take the cycle track from along the Hipburn, and that runs down from south from the cricket ground, the Lesbury cricket ground. You walk down there and you get to a corner, and there's a little seat in there, and it gives you a chance to view that nice little marsh, salt marsh, mud flats, and there's one or two little sort of scrapes in there as well. That's a good place to start, and from there you can then head on down to Alnmouth itself, and you get onto you cross the Duchess Bridge, and you can walk the east side of the River Aln along Lovers Walk, and again that takes you alongside another bit of mud where you can watch birds congregate. And you'll see all sorts of red shanks there, green shanks as well. Green shanks are similar to red, but they're slightly bigger and they've got green legs. But they occupy a very similar niche. So these two places are really quite interesting. But from there, I would then head up the shore quite quickly, up the sandy shore, and you're likely to see sandalling on the shore anywhere up there towards Seaton Point. Now we're heading up to Boomer here. Now Seaton Point is kind of the north end of Alnmouth Bay, and it's a rocky shore, but when you get around the rocky bits, there's some nice little sheltered coves there, and on the rising tide, or almost close to the top of the tide, you'll see gatherings, and particularly when there's a lot of seaweed and kelp in particular being dropped on the top of the shore, because a lot of the wading birds, the small wading birds like dunlins and sanderlings, and perhaps even the odd purple sandpiper, will gather on those rotting seaweed clumps and to feed on invertebrates. But what they're doing as well, they're going to be pushed to the top of the shore to have their roost. And this is when they're most vulnerable. We should be so careful of not disturbing them, because this is their vulnerable time. But the dunlin are really quite small wader, and sanderling are those kind of when you see them in their winter plumage, they're very, very white, and they'll run up and down the shore, and we'll see ring plovers in amongst those guys as well. Ring plovers have got these kind of black breastbands to them, quite short bills, and they feed on the surface. But also we'll potentially see quite a big flock of golden plover, and they're related to lapwings, and they've got quite short bills as well. And as the name suggests, they're quite golden. But if you see them at the back of the summer, you'll see them in their, you'll see they'll have black bellies, and they'll really look quite contrasty. You may well see grey plovers in amongst with them as well, and they've got grey backs as opposed to the golden backs of the grey plover, and they're slightly bigger. So yes, and you get round sort of Seaton Point towards Boomer Village, and then when you get further into the bay, heading north, you'll see there's a chance to see bar-tailed godwits. We've talked about black-tailed godwits on the Aln estuary, but we have bar-tails as well. And these are very similar to black-tails, but they've got barring on their tails and slightly up-curved bills, quite long bills compared to their heads. So there's another species of wader on there. But heading north from Boomer, just following the shoreline up, you get north of Boomer Village. And if you look down onto that little bit of sandy beach there, it's packed full of invertebrate life, and sometimes you get weed on there as well, rotten weed, which actually really serves to enhance the whole thing, which is brilliant. And there's big gatherings of small shorebirds there, and that shorebirds is just another name for wading birds. And we'll see the gatherings there. But from there, you will trek off further further north, and you're heading for Long Horton Steel. So you're following along the cycle path, the Northumberland coast path that runs up to there. But it's kind of there's a lookout pole, but you go a bit further up there, and right to the almost to the main point where you'd have to turn left, sharp left, and to cross the burn and get onto Long Horton Sands. But there, you needn't go any further than Long Horton Steel. Long Horton Steel has a big sort of expanse of rock, particularly at low tide. And as tide progresses, it brings up an awful lot of wading birds. But also there's a good selection of gulls there. There's black-headed gulls, herring gulls, and just recently we've seen yellow-legged gull, which is a type of herring gull, or looks like herring gull. But it's quite unusual in this part of the world. But also there's a big gathering of terns there. All the species of terns, particularly in the early autumn, we're seeing gatherings before they head off south. But it's a great place for wading birds right through the autumn and into winter. I go up there a lot during the winter time, and it's a great place to be. Take some sandwiches, and there's a seat up there. Take some sandwiches in a flask, and you can go and have your lunch or your tea up there, and just watch the tide push all these birds into the right area, so you can actually see them. But also, if the wind's right, it can be very, very good for seabird passage. And you can see divers and grebes, shearwaters, all sorts of things from there. And actually, it's a great walk out as well. And if you're like me, who likes to walk and whilst you're bird watching, it's a great thing to do. So there you are. There's a nice little sort of walking section from Almouth to the top end of Boomer. And it's one of my favourite places, and you'll see stacks and stacks of birds there. So it's great fun. So get out and with your binoculars and do some birding, and gan canny folks. Great.
Well, today we're in the August garden with Tom Pattinson, where it's buzzing with activity. Let's see where he's up to in his fabulous flowers and shrubs. Over to you, Tom.
Well, I've walked around to the front of the house to the east-facing garden, and it's 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's still getting full sunshine. There's still a breeze, and the breeze is affecting the sound system if I don't keep out a direct draft. So I've hustled in to amongst the shrubs, and we have some super shrubs here. A, it's sheltered, and B, the sun isn't beating down on me so hotly. Anyway, I'm standing in front of or beside an Elaeagnus, which is a beautiful shrub. It has golden variegated foliage, golden green, and you've got to watch these variegated shrubs. This time of the year, pick it up. Some of them revert to the green state if they're stressed, and there's been quite a bit of stress recently from excessive heat. Temperatures up into 30s anyway in the north, and as we know, 40 in some instance way down south of the River Tyne, and you look out for them stressing and sending out the original green shoots. I've got a long green shoot here. It's not going to change into variegated foliage, so I'll cut that off from the base, from its source. Now, just to keep everything, I've got a beautiful Lonicera, Nitida, Bagason's Gold in front of me as well. It's a gorgeous thing. Euonymus over there, the golden and the silver variegated. All of these shrubs come into their own in winter time, of course, these evergreen variegated shrubs. But at the moment, the sun's shining on them, and they just blend in with all the flowers. And what a display of flowers we've got, for goodness sake. The mixed borders, there's a sort of an oval-shaped lawn, and at the heart of it, but they go all the way around, and starts off with things like, let's say, the herbaceous perennials, which come every year, of course, and we divide them up in the autumn period to propagate from them. And there's a whole list I'm looking at. I'm spotting from this angle. There's the Achillea, Nautia, Monarda. I can see Monarda. That's the one that goes into the Earl Grey tea. And Sidalcia, which is the a beautiful pink flowering plant. By the way, we got pinks, whites, yellows. I can see reds there, a lavender colour and purple. Quite a display of colours from them. There's coreopsis, the yellow coreopsis is there, beautifully shining out from the border. Gazania, which is a really showy one. Scabious, the pincushion plant. And by the way, I'm seeing bees everywhere, and some butterflies too. And they love the scabious, the pincushion plant, or the salvias. They're perennials, herbaceous perennial. Rudbeckia and echinacea, those cone flowers with a very dark cone in the centre, and the yellow to orangish flowers. Just beautiful. I'm picking those ones out at the moment, but I also see quite a few shrubs, there's Lavatera barnsley there with the two-tone sort of pinkish flowers there. Beautiful. I like that. It's easily raised from stem cuttings, sometimes hardwood cuttings, or could be softwood cuttings this time of year. And along the front, the driveway that comes up and swings around to the front door, that driveway, it's planted up with a heck of a lot of lavender headcut, and it is just gorgeous. And the bees, it's buzzing with bees. I'll venture across there shortly and see if we can get a bit of a buzzing sound, because on a still day, when you're sitting next to it, and butterflies come, of course, along to it, there are, we've got there's salvias over there, of course, the annual salvia as well as the perennial salvia I just mentioned. Garden pinks, there's Nicotiana, the tobacco plant, which has a lovely fragrance in the evening. It is just stunning. And penstemons, we've got penstemons in a range of colours there, little groups of penstemon as well. The whole thing is literally buzzing with activity. I'm just going to venture across and see. This is a lovely place to spend time with a cup of coffee and just thinking about life in general and relaxing. Anyway, I'm happy in this garden at the moment. It's going to take something to move me. I'm going to walk across to the greenhouse, which is over to the west, at the back of the house. Mentioned a couple of things in there and give you something to think about for your garden for the coming week.
The seasons are a strange thing in the world of birds, and Tom Cadwallender's been keeping an eye on the comings and goings of some of our summer and autumn species.
For many of us, the thought that autumn is upon us in kind of late July, early August is just a completely alien concept. But for wading birds, autumn has been underway, and by autumn I mean the autumn migration has been underway for several weeks. And a lot of these birds that we see coming through onto the Northumberland coast are birds which have bred an awful long way north in the high Arctic, and they've had their breeding season. It's quite a short season because the window of opportunity is really quite narrow. And so they go up there and exploit the food resource. So yes, they've done all of that, and they're starting to make their way back. But some of the earlier ones are the failed breeders, and there's always failed breeders around. But anyway, this time of year, yes, we're getting really into the autumn migration, and to see some of these waders coming down and to use the Northumberland coast as a kind of a service station, just fattening up as they head on to points further south is incredible. But some of these birds will be coming here for the winter. Believe it or not, we're talking about winter now, and it's just beginning of August, for goodness sake. It's crazy. But actually, this is normal practice, normal procedure. And it's wonderful, actually, because we're seeing birds coming down from a long way north, as I've mentioned, but the adults are still in their summer plumage. And to see some of these wading birds in their summer plumage is an absolute delight. There's one species in particular, I'm going to talk about several species, but there's one species which I think epitomises this whole thing quite nicely. And that's a species called a knot, K-N-O-T. And the one that we have, there's only two species of knot found in the world, and these are medium-sized wading birds, slightly bigger than redshanks. So they're about sort of 6 to 7 inches tall. And they've got relatively short bills, so they feed this kind of surface feeders on the mud, and they'll feed on small invertebrates. But these birds, some of them are coming down from Arctic Canada, for goodness sake. But there's one I want to talk about is the red knot. And the name red knot may well give you a clue to its summer plumage, because in the wintertime it's really quite nondescript. It's grey and has sort of greeny legs. But in the summer, adults are coming back, and the red, it's brick red, and they're fabulous. They're fabulous. And the numbers are starting to build now. You got Lindisfarne, and where the numbers are quite good. There's several hundred of them there. I mean, these birds will hang around for a little while, but they'll make their way down to perhaps even into South Africa for the winter. But a number of them will stay around, and they'll stay on the Wash, and the big estuary that's there, and they'll hang around there in their tens of thousands, which is incredible. But we see them in small numbers through here, and when you see them in their red plumage, and I've just been watching one this morning, and it's fantastic. It really is. But that's one species in its summer plumage. Then it'll gradually molt into its winter plumage. But the young ones that are coming along with the adults, they are really grey, and I think, are these the same species? Quite odd. Another one that I want to mention is the dunlin. And dunlin is probably the most common of the wading birds that we have on our bit of coastline. And again, these are coming from a long way north. The adults in their breeding plumage, they've got really quite rich, dark black bellies. And they're smaller than knots, but the bill compared to the head size is a little bit bigger. So these birds will tend to perhaps just feed on the surface, but also they will feed on the on seaweeds, the rotten kelp that comes on the shore during the kind of the late summer and early autumn storms. And the rotten kelp will attract lots of insect larvae. The adults are coming through, and they've got really quite dark bellies. And again, there's about 12 different races, different subspecies of dunlin, and they're coming from all points north of in the Arctic, and they're coming through the Northumberland coast. And to see them in their dark bellies, it's just amazing. And then we have the red shank, and the most ubiquitous of the wading birds we have, and they're noisy, really are noisy. And they stand a little bit taller. These will stand about 8 inches high, and you'll know them because they've got red legs, as the name suggests. And they're kind of in quite big numbers, and they're very noisy. Their kind of nickname is the keeper of the marsh. Any sort of sign of danger, and they're alarming. But the other birds that we have coming through into winter or passage through here are the lapwings, and the lapwings that we see, particularly on my bit of the coastline. My bit, listen to that. The bit of coastline that I spend a lot of time in is the Alne Estuary. And we got lapwings coming in. There is a small population of lapwings which breed here, and I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with lapwings. They're the peewits of old, and they breed in sort of marshy areas. But the British breeding birds will actually move out and head south into the kind of the Iberian Peninsula, for example, or even into North Africa for winter. And that space is backfilled by birds coming from northern Scandinavia. And currently on the Alne Estuary, there's something like 400 of them, and they're going to be here for the duration until next spring, and then they'll start to clear off. So these birds have been arriving since July. So we've got wintering birds coming here from the far north, which are going to be spending their time here. And the lapwing is quite a funny bird. This is the one that's got the crest, And also the old saying is, what's up when it's down, and down when it's up. And that's the crest on a lapwing's head. And it's quite interesting. You see them. And they used to be known as the green plover, because they have this kind of greeny sort of hue to them. And you see them in the light, and they look fabulous. And they've got an odd-shaped wing, almost like a big sort of hammer-shaped wing. And they make the noise, and of course you're familiar with all of those guys, and it's that they're here in big numbers. But the curlews are building. There's a lot of concern about curlews. The curlews are probably the biggest of the waders that we have coming in, and they're the ones with the big, long, decurved bills, and they'll stand about 10 to 12 inches tall, and they're the emblem of Northumberland National Park. And the summer birds, there's a concern about the breeding birds that we have in the UK, and the population is in decline. And they used to be shot, hard to imagine, but there's been a moratorium, particularly in France, where a lot of our local birds, our British breeding birds, go, and there's a moratorium now in shooting curlews in the wintertime. But our breeding birds will clear out and they'll be backfilled by birds from northern Scandinavia. We know that through ringing recoveries, and we know that the numbers are coming in from there. And we've got 200 to 300 birds on the Alne estuary at the current time. It's just a wonderful sort of noise to hear, particularly at the high tide roost. Now, if you are interested in seeing a lot of these wading birds, get down to the shore just on a rising tide, and you'll see the birds gather, because during the low tides they'll be widespread throughout the whole kind of area on the soft substrates, or on the rocky shore, or on weed banks or so forth. But as the tide rises, these birds will become increasingly concentrated at the top of the beach, so it's a great time to see them. And really, to finish off this a little bit about some of the waders, I haven't covered all the waders, but just some of them. There's on the Alne estuary, there's been this big gathering of black-tailed godwits. These godwits are slightly smaller than curlews, but they have a straight bill, though, where a curlew has a down-curved bill. And the birds that are the blacktails, as the name suggests, have got a big black band on the end of their tail, dead giveaway, and they've got a big white flash in their wing. And they've been coming in. And this last sort of 3 or 4 years, these birds have been breeding in Iceland. And the breeding season has been so good, so great. The numbers are building nicely. And about 10 days ago, I had a record number of black-tailed godwits on the Alne estuary of 75, which is amazing. And I've heard just recently there's been 150 or so of them down on Druidge Bay, East Chevington. So there's good signs of the excellent breeding season they've had. But the adult black-tailed godwits, there's another species that has this brick red adult breeding plumage, and they're a startling bird. They're brilliant. But the young ones, they have a much more greyer sort of underparts, and they're fantastic, really, when you see them like that. So what an incredibly exciting time for migration. And as you know, migration is a big turn-on for me. But it should be for everybody, because these birds are piling through and they're coming through in great numbers. So yes, when next we speak, we'll have a lot of these birds in place, and the numbers of wintering birds will just be fantastic. So there we are, folks. Wading birds on the Northumberland coast. Go and see them.
Here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
Well, here I am in the greenhouse, and this is the base for one of the jobs of the week. It's a daily task, but it's worthwhile. We've just finished harvesting and just 1 or 2 more peaches left, ripe peaches on the peregrine peach tree. It has been watered all along, but there are 3 other crops in here which demand water because they produce fruits which swell. First is the tomato. I've had a few varieties of tomato: Gardener's Delight, a golden variety, Ailsa Craig, etc. A few of those, and they're good trusses hanging here. We've been eating them for about 10 days, 2 weeks now. They're ripening very rapidly. I've removed quite a lot of the lower leaves, because at this stage of the year, if there's so many leaves clogging up the area, the airspace around the base, you can get some mildew on the plant, on the leaves first of all, and it turns and affects the fruits themselves. So I've got about the bottom third of each stem. I've removed the leaves completely. Doesn't upset the plant too much, it just carries on, means more light and air can get in, and shortly I'll be moving further up the stem, so by the time late September comes, there'll be barely any leaves on at all, and just the trusses hanging there. It works for me. That's the way to go about it as far as I'm concerned. Watering is essential, of course. Each of these fruits, the tomato, the mini cucumber, which is giving so many fruits for one plant, and the grapes themselves, which are dangling above, and what a crop we have yet again this year. All of them need to swell. For that they need water, water, water. The atmosphere in here is it's a lovely moist atmosphere, because I've been soaking the flat floor with water, which keeps the temperature down and keeps the humidity up, which is ideal. They're growing beautifully. The other crop in here at the moment is a streptocarpus. I'm surrounded, one long row that's 24 feet long, this greenhouse, and the whole of the bench has got 14 different varieties: pink, white, red, and so it goes on. Quite a mixture here, beautiful. Talk about them some other time. But watering is essential. As you know, at the moment, there's been a period of drought. That's the best word for it. We haven't had a lot of significant rain for ages. We've done a lot of watering in here and outside. So the same applies to your vegetables. The vegetables need some water, otherwise they'll collapse. And after all the work we've put in, you can't let them collapse just for the want of a little bit of water. So that's to be seen to. I mentioned earlier I'm doing continuous crops, the salad crops especially, and I'll keep on doing this until the end of August. I'll sow yet another crop of lettuce, at least another one more crop, and then I come into in here in the autumn into the greenhouse, and I sow some in the border, and they keep me going. Fresh leaf lettuce over winter. They're that hardy, and there's no artificial heat in here at all. Outside there, I've cut the lawns today. That's important. And here's another point. Don't get upset or worried if your lawn goes completely brown and you think all the grass is dead. It just does not. It happens, but the grass is not dead. You'd be surprised. 1 or 2 showers of rain, it just springs back. So don't fret if it goes brown. I don't get the hose out of mine, waste of water as far as I'm concerned. If it goes brown, it goes brown, and nature will restore it, the same lawn. Also out there at the moment, if you're sowing for a crop of lettuce to continue, then herbaceous perennials. If you buy a herbaceous perennial plant, I mentioned some earlier in the border, which are entertaining us at the moment, it'll cost you £5-6, possibly more, for a decent sized plant in a pot. If you buy a packet of seed for £2 or £3, well under £5 anyway, for most of the herbaceous perennials, which attract birds, which attract butterflies, then sow it in the garden now. Just the open garden in an open drill, as you would the salad crops, the lettuce, the turnip, anything like that. Water them in and cover them over. They will germinate and they'll grow on in your garden, your open garden. That's a way of saving money. Apart from that, for goodness sake, this is the best time of the year as far as I'm concerned. Enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Northumberland Rivers Trust and Cresswell Peel Tower. I'm Carl Steinson, and, well, that's it for us for the summer for now as we take a break for a few weeks. Don't forget you can listen back to all our previous shows on the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. Enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature, and see you in September. Bye for now.